It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, I'd like to start with you this week. It is amazing to see the results of Joe Biden's State of the Union address. I think you were predicting a stronger performance than many anticipated, and it came through. So it's really changed, at least temporarily, the emotions of many Democrats in particular. But there are problems ahead with this, especially with the threat of a third party. And I'd like to start with your analysis.
Well, first of all, I think President Biden gave an excellent State of the Union, but one of the things, there's a limit to the State of the Union, and that is that while it has a large audience, it's often a very favorable audience. And as a result, he really hasn't gotten much bounce in the polls yet. But what he did do, and what I said was important, I think he set a narrative making this election from his perspective, and I think this narrative will take, because Trump will reinforce it, is an up and down vote on democracy. Look, this is the election nobody wanted. At least that's what the polls told us. And so that makes it, the likelihood of a third party candidate greater. And in an ordinary year, that'd be a good thing. You all know that I believe that this year, 2024, is a unique year, and that a third party candidate would be dangerous. I think America needs an up or down vote on democracy. Trump poses a direct existential threat to democracy. He makes it clear every day in what he says. Biden is going to make preserving our democracy central to his campaign. Voters don't have to be confused with a bunch of tangential third-party candidates. Look, third-party candidates can't win, but they can be spoilers. And that's the danger. Because in this election in particular, because of the nature of the vote for the candidate, it is likely that a third party candidate would take more votes from Biden than from Trump and help Trump win the election. Look, Trump's vote is dead solid. People are for him or against him. He's a very polarizing candidate, and his voters are going to be for him come hell or high water. It doesn't matter how many times he's thrown in jail. They're still going to vote for him. The anti-Biden voters or anti-Trump voters are just as passionate, but the problem is that they aren't necessarily pro-Biden, and if there's a choice, they might go for somebody else. We already know what happened, how this works. This election is going to be decided in 5 states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia. Those states flipped from 2016 to 2020, from Trump to Biden, and that was the election. In those 5 states, in both years, Trump got exactly the same amount of votes. He got 48.8% of the vote in those 5 states. But in 2016, third-party candidates got about 4.5%, and that drove Hillary Clinton down below 48.8%, so she lost them all. In 2020, the third-party candidates were about 1.4%, and as a result, Biden got 49.8%, I think, in those states, and he won all of them. So the danger of a third-party candidate is that they will not win, but that they could undermine our democracy by allowing the anti-democratic candidate to win.
Craig, did you think that Joe Biden had a good night?
I thought Joe Biden had a good night, and I thought and believe that he actually exceeded expectations. I agree with Al, though. I think the result was it tended to fortify his supporters and didn't change the minds of independents or opponents that much. And the polling today suggested, and you just can't get away from this. Al identified the battleground states. Trump's ahead in every one of those states. Pennsylvania, interestingly enough, the state that Biden went to right after the State of the Union to keep the momentum going. Pennsylvania is probably a tie. It's within the margin of error. The right direction, wrong track numbers didn't change. The approved, disapproved numbers didn't change. And so you have to ask yourself, well, in an election year, there are only so many defining events that come along. Some are going to be there, State of the Union speech being one of them. Others happen on the campaign trail, and there's the convention. But you need to, especially when you're behind, you need to change the momentum. You need to chip away at this at each stage. And I must say that I thought you'd see more of that after the State of the Union, but the real politics kind of summary of polling, when you look at the graph, it's a little bit of a blip up, and then it settled right back down again. And it's just two parallel lines where Trump's in the lead, and that's a problem. And the other issue I would say is that while you probably can't call it a defining event, one of the things the president does after the State of the Union is release his budget. Now, the Biden administration budget for fiscal year 2025, which starts in October of this year, is not a document that's going to be seriously read on the Hill or embraced. They never are. They're almost dead on arrival. But what they did with this budget is pack everything into it they possibly could, and I think have set themselves up for criticism just in terms of the spending. It's a $7.3 trillion budget. That's huge. And when you realize that the revenues coming in through taxes are 5.5 trillion, it leaves you with this huge gap, a huge borrowing gap of trillions of dollars, and $1.8 trillion. And that's if they get the tax increases on the rich, which are throughout the document, and they get continued growth in the economy, and we don't have any hiccup or interruption like a pandemic or a military issue of some kind. And if that's not bad enough, the budget that was presented has a 10-year window. The revenues over that 10 years add up to 70 trillion, again with pretty optimistic figures on tax increases and strong economy. So 70 trillion in revenues, but the spending's 86 trillion, almost 87 trillion. And for many people, for many Republicans who might actually be wavering, this kind of spending poses, a real philosophical problem, because it creates a level of deficit that's comparable to times of war, frankly. And so I know the Biden administration doesn't really expect to pass this budget, but by presenting it as their document and filling it with every possible, opportunity to give money away or to reduce debt or college debt or whatever, I think they've created a problem for themselves, and I think it's going to come back in both hearings on the Hill and around the country, that people are concerned about spending, and that what they don't need are more problems. What the Biden administration does need to pursue is is a policy or a prescription for how they're going to improve everybody's life, not just to give a lot of money away. So I think it kind of was maybe a missed opportunity. It didn't seem to help as much, although it did fortify, I think, people who already supported Biden. It fortified that support, and they felt, well, okay, we got a real candidate here. We can go forward. That's important.
Al, I want to go back to some of your thoughts about the third party challenge. I think you all might have seen that RFK Jr. is going to be making his vice presidential choice in the next 2 weeks, and it's the former Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers, or Jesse Ventura from Minnesota. And from the outside point of view, that looks like very challenging people to run with. But it seems that many people feel like this is really going to have some impact, especially when races are close. And so, wanted to get your take on that.
Look, if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. gets on the ballot, it doesn't really matter who his vice president is going to be. He'll be a problem. The thing about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is that in a sense, he's an outlier candidate. He's he's a conspiracy theorist. He's anti-vax. He's against Ukraine. As far as I can tell, he's be perfectly content with Trump winning. He doesn't really care about democracy very much, but he likes to get a lot of press. But his problem is he's not on many ballots. I think he's on Utah and maybe one other. And I think he may have just gotten on Arizona, but there's a problem because his effort in Arizona was financed by his super PAC, and that's against the law. And so the super PAC is now withdrawn from, I mean, I don't think they knew it, but the super PAC's now withdrawn from helping him get on the ballot. So if he doesn't get the Libertarian Party nomination, he probably won't be on the ballot in any of the swing states, and that'd be a good thing. I don't think things like the budget are going to matter Tinker's dam in this election. When Trump's on the ballot, there's one question: are you going to vote for him or are you going to vote against him? Mm-hmm. And more people want to vote against him than vote for him. Not by much, but he had the same vote nationally in 2016 as in 2020. As I said, in the swing states, he had exactly the same vote, 48.8% in those 5 swing states, both years. So the question is, what happens to the anti-Trump votes? Because if they unify behind Joe Biden, as they did in 2020, he will be elected. If they split, as they did in 2016, even a little bit, I mean, we're not 4.5%, it's not a big showing. But if they're really over 2% in those swing states, the chances are Trump will win, even though he probably won't win the majority of the popular vote. Look, the problem with third-party candidates is they are going to be a spoiler. Trump actually does a little bit better in the swing states, or at least the Midwestern swing states, than he does nationally, because they're more non-college voters, which is his base, and he can get them out in ways that no other candidate can. But the problem is there has not been a third-party candidate who has won an electoral vote in more than half a century. The last one was George Wallace, and before that it was Strom Thurmond. I mean, you basically have to have a radical message that appeals to a couple of states to get any electoral votes, and none of these third-party candidates will win a single state probably, but they will take enough votes from Biden to basically to throw the election to Trump. And that's why I am working with a bipartisan group that is led by a congressman, former Democratic leader Dick Gephardt, but includes people like Bill Cohen and Chuck Hagel, and some of the best Republican operatives who are trying to get all these candidates, third-party candidates, to sign what we call a no-spoiler pledge. And they pledge that they'll withdraw their names from the ballot in the 5 swing states or any other swing states if by July 1st, one, they can't have a mathematical possibility of getting 270 electoral votes, so they can't win. And secondly, if they're trailing and not first or second in any of the major polls. Look, this election is not ideal, but when the choices are stark, is democracy or autocracy, I think we have to have a very clear choice, so the majority of voters in America who believe in democracy can prevail.
Greg, you can speak with some candor on this, because I don't believe you will be voting for former President Trump. Where do people like you go?
Well, so that's the challenge. And I've always been one who believes at the end of the day, once you have both parties nominating a candidate, it becomes a two-person race. But I think Al is right. And this time around, with the margins so tight, if there is a candidate that, even if it's just a protest vote, that takes 2-3 percentage points away in some of these states, it's going to tilt the balance, and it's not going to necessarily tilt it away from Trump. I think that's quite likely. I have not taken Robert Kennedy Jr. very seriously, to be honest with you, because I just didn't think that as he became better known and the more he campaigned, that he would be a person that people would support. But again, when you look down a survey of the candidates, of the political figures out there, all the candidates, except one, are running with a disapproval number that's higher than their approval number. Disapproval higher than approval, except one, Robert Kennedy Jr. He's got more people approving of him slightly than disapprove of him. Now, they don't know him very well. I think that's probably more a statement of protest than anything else. But it's a sign that, and I think it validates what Al has said, that somebody could come in, enter this contest, and actually affect it, maybe in ways they don't intend to. The protest voting is interesting on the Republican side because Trump does have a lock on his supporters. On the other hand, in Georgia, I think about 500,000 voters voted in the Republican primary for Trump, but 70,000 voted mostly for Nikki Haley, or for DeSantis, or for the former governor of New Jersey. I mean, all the candidates who had dropped out. And, that's a state that I think Biden carried by 12,000 votes. So Trump has issues too. On the Republican side, where voters haven't made up their mind. Question is that third party candidate, and there could be more than one, do they draw those people who are Republicans, away from Trump, but also away from Biden? And so the risk is very real in a contest that has a huge impact. A friend of mine, who's a conservative friend of mine, said that he would ordinarily vote for the Republican, but he's not going to vote for Trump. And his argument was that the things that President Trump could do could take us decades to recover from, whereas Biden, bad as he might be, we could change in the next election. So it's a bit of a cynical view. But you asked me where Republicans are going. At least in that case, he's going to hold his nose and vote for the incumbent, I think.
Wow. Can I just say one quick more thing? And that is, the danger isn't that these third-party candidates are going to run well, or that they're going to, none of them's going to be a Ross Perot. The danger is that they're going to run it all in the swing states. And just by natural drop-off, if you have somebody who's got a rock-solid vote, then the question is how the rest of that vote splits, the anti-Trump vote splits. And if they Jill Stein and Gary Johnson in 2016 only won 4.5% of the votes in those 5 swing states. And it was enough to flip every one of them to Trump. And he's sitting in the White House, even though he lost the popular vote by almost 3 million votes. So that's the danger. It's not that they're going to run well. It's certainly not that they're going to win. I mean, it's that if they run at all, they are likely to be a spoiler.
Well, we have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We'll see you next week.